Yeah. With all the details, the scrolls. And he's talking. Not another super president. I'm smoking. 20%. 1%. He's not the distribution version. Industrial. It's double.
Morning, everybody.
Yeah. And you got sales temperature results. For me, it's that's what they do. That's the struggle. Or with honey oil, this guys.
So we're soon going to be finished with this volume of Oholei Yaakov. There's a second volume, which we'll get into other Choshen Mishpat Halacha, which will start shortly. But this is the last part of the Sefer, which is She'elot Utshuvot V'chikrei Dinim. Just, I guess, quick fire questions. And I guess we'll go through just reviewing some of the things we've learned already. So Siman Aleph, Stam Halva'a Shloshim Yom, that when you lend someone money without specifying the amount of time of the loan, it's assumed to be for 30 days. That's what the Gemara says. She'ela hamalvet chaveru stam v'lo kavalo zman piraon. Ha'im yachol litvoa mehamalve et halva'ato ematai, I think it's a typo, mehalove et halva'ato ematai sheyirtzeh o yesh zman kavua kishalava b'stam. So when you lend someone money, does the creditor have a right to demand repayment at any time? Or is there a certain assumed time of the duration of the loan? So hamalvis chaveru v'kavalo zman leparo ein yochel hamalva litvos alva kodem hazman. So the first halacha is that when you lend a person an amount of money for a fixed time, let's say you say, here, it's yours for 6 months. So then you are not allowed to even request repayment of the loan anytime before that. Bein imza milva alpeh, ubein imza milva bishtar. And it makes no difference whether the loan was done with paper or without paper. Ubein shehiniach etzlo mashkon, ubein shelo b'mashkon. It also makes no difference whether there was collateral put forward on the loan or not. Va'afilu shelo kava hamal v'zman lahachzaras hahalva, enu yachol litva mehamilva ela dafka acharei shloshim yom mehahalva. That and even when there is no established time set for the loan. So I lend you the money, say, pay me back when you can. The assumption is that it's a 30-day loan, and I cannot ask him for repayment within those first 30 days. And the reason is, as he says in the parentheses, Shestam halvahu ilu shloshim yom.
What's the basis?
I guess Chazal made an assessment that most people, when they lend money, they figured that a month is the reasonable amount of time that people would want their money to be out of their possession. And it's a reasonable amount of time to expect someone to pay back the loan. But of course, it all goes according to what you stipulate. If you stipulate that it's a 2-week loan, then you do have a right to say after 2 weeks, pay me back. But however, obviously, if there was a stipulation made at the time of the loan that I can demand repayment at any time, then you can even ask him, if you lend him money in the morning, you can even ask him by the afternoon, where's my money? Okay, because everything goes according to the stipulation when it comes to monetary matters. Okay, you can change the terms of a financial agreement based upon whatever you stipulate at the outset of that agreement of the end of that transaction. Okay, let us go on. V'yesh omrim shedin zenemar af ba'arev ve'amrinan stam halva l'shloshim yom. Some say that this halacha of standard loans are 30 days can be said for guarantors as well. That what? V'imkein acharei shechizer hamal ve'achar haloi ve'lo matza klum v'nischayv ha'arev l'shalem harei ze ki'ilu hilvehu achshav v'lo yehi koach ha'arev achshav garua mehalova v'dimo kistam lova. And therefore, if let's say a lender demands repayment, he cannot go, and it's within the 30 days or it's within the terms of the loan, he cannot go after the guarantor as well. Just like I can't go after the borrower, I can't go after the arev. Okay, so that's the same thing. Okay. And he goes into a bunch of different okay, Siman Beis. Is it permissible, and this is something that we had seen, if not in this sefer, I think in the previous sefer that we were learning together, when we were learning Rav Shraga's Shuvas, we also we had a big discussion about this. Is the lender allowed to appear in the presence of the borrower? In other words, we know that the lo sia lo kenosha, the Torah says that when you lend someone money, you may not be an oppressor to him. So what does an oppressor mean? Someone who's going to make the guy feel bad that he hasn't paid back the loan. So are you allowed to, sort of show up at his doorstep and say, hi, I happened to see your newspaper was a few feet away from your doorstep. Gee, lovely weather we're having, isn't it? And sort of reminding him that, that you're here and the loan is due without even saying it.
It was a nice day until
yeah. She'ilah harlacha rovachat biyadenu she'asa lamal v'lingos v'litchok et halo v'lifroa k'sheyodea she'en lo mima lahachzir. It is a well-known halacha that it is prohibited for the lender to in any way apply pressure to the borrower when he knows that he doesn't have the wherewithal to pay back. Okay? As the Torah says, you may not be his oppressor. And therefore, anytime you ask him for payment when you know he doesn't have it, you're in violation of that biblical law. V'yesh lishol ha'im mutar lamalva leheraot panav bifnei halova. So the question is, what if you say nothing, but you just sort of show up one day in front of him? Uvazel l'ramezlo she'alav lidog l'shalem et chavo shelav hameito, and you're just trying to remind him that he's got a debt to pay. Like, why were you up at the cottage? Why were you up at the cottage the whole summer? And no effort was made to contact me or to pay me back. And it could be that the guy is derelict in his responsibility. I mean, he claims he doesn't have the funds right now to pay you back, and he's gone camping with his family, so he doesn't want to be disturbed, and he doesn't have the ability to pay back the loan that was due 3 weeks ago. So I just want to just make him feel a little uncomfortable, so that he'll know that this is not going to go away.
What about sending one Dunning
A what?
Dunning a letter that says he's overdue today 30, 60.
Yeah.
They send out these.
Well, it's again, the question is, first of all, does he know that he owes the money? Does he have the wherewithal to pay? The Torah's prohibition applies in a situation where you know with fair certainty that he doesn't have the ability to pay back the loan. So what if I just want to say, hi, neighbor, and just remind him that way? Onema degam leheros b'fanav aser. Or is that too prohibited? So the tshuva is, keshehigia zman hapirot, v'hamalve yodeya, she'ein lelova mehechan l'shalem hachov. When the loan has matured and the lender knows that there is that the borrower has not recouped whatever he borrowed in order to pay back the loan, because basically, what's that? A dunning letter is a formal written communication sent to a customer client with an overdue. I never even heard that word before. A dunning letter. A dunning letter.
It's named after Carl Dunning.
Is it?
Yeah, he's a guy who once resided somewhere. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, okay. So anyway, a few leharos b'fanav aser. So then, even if you know he doesn't have the ability to pay, then even appearing before him is going to be prohibited. Kevan shekeshiro es amalve ve'en yado maseges lifroa halo v'nichlam biroso es amalve lefanav. Why? Because you're causing him embarrassment. Ulam yesh matirin lahaskir lolovet inyan hachov ba'oven shechoshe shemesh shachach es chov halva. But you are permitted to remind him, according to many poskim, that the loan is due if your reason for doing so is because you suspect that he may have forgotten. In other words, if you genuinely feel, hey, maybe the guy just needs a little nudge. Maybe he's just been so busy that he's forgotten about the fact that he borrowed money from me. So according to some poskim, you are allowed to remind him, send him a dunning letter, or just yeah,
19th century.
yeah, who was dunning.
It's a verb, it says.
It's a food.
Can you go to the same minion?
That's what I'm saying.
That's a minion.
Well, so we did have that conversation, and what we ended up saying is that as long as you're not going out of your way to sort of be in his face, it's like you go. We normally both go to the 645 minion, but then like I go over to him and I'm looking at his tefillin,
It's sweet.
yeah.
I can't make it.
Take a shortcut from the.
Shell Roach is not straight.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway. Okay. Now, so we may want to look into this a little bit. First, he brings the sources in the halacha, which we don't have to go through right now because it's pretty black and white. He says, Yesh omrim kishein lo ma'os, aval yesh lo dvarim acherim l'shalem, keven de yesh li histapek ula yesh lo mima l'shalem lefichach eno over at l'isr l'silo kenosha. Some say, let's say you know the guy told you, as soon as this deal finishes, I'll be liquid again, I'll have assets to pay you back with, and I'll be able to pay you back the loan. And you know that the deal hasn't gone through yet. So that's where we say, lo siya, lo kenosha. Don't oppress him if you know he doesn't have the money. But let's say he has other assets. Then, when you lend someone money, you have a lien on all of their possessions, including their real estate, and certainly on their chattel. So when a person does have the wherewithal to pay, but he doesn't want to have to part with something that is a personal asset, so then you would have a right, according to this opinion, to go ahead and say, listen, I understand that the deal hasn't gone through, but I want to remind you that when I lent you the money, it wasn't contingent upon your business deal being successful. I lent you the money as a loan, and even though it may be inconvenient for you to have to liquidate some of your assets, I do expect repayment of the loan, regardless of whether your deal goes through. So he says, well, would you please wait another 30 days? I said, okay, I'll wait another 30 days, but after that, I expect that you're going to be able to get the cash, if not from that business deal that you're expecting to succeed, which may or may not ever happen, you're going to get it from somewhere else. And if necessary, we'll have to garnish your wages, or you'll have to tighten your belt. Instead of going on vacation with your family, you'll take that money and pay me back what you owe. There's nothing wrong with a person saying that to a debtor if he feels that the debtor is being irresponsible in paying back his loan. Because he may see the debtor's attitude may be, well, yeah, of course I'm going to pay you back, but I don't want to have to change my lifestyle in order to pay you back the loan. And in that kind of situation, a lender has every right to say, yes, change your lifestyle. Yeah, you owe me the money. And so there's no prohibition of lo siya lo kenosha, because the guy is taking advantage. Okay.
So what's the responsibility of the borrower to communicate with the lender what his situation is? Like, we talk about the fact that the lender shouldn't put pressure on the borrower and embarrass him. But if the borrower is not communicating that, if he doesn't say 2 days or 3 days before the loan's due,
It's clearly the borrower's responsibility to be honest and upfront. However, the Torah places more of a burden on the lender than it does on the borrower, surprisingly. Yeah, because the Torah is sensitive to those who are financially oppressed. Remember, the Torah roots for the underdog, and when a person is a borrower, he's automatically considered the underdog. And it says it's a pasuk in Koheles, which says, "V'Elokim yivakesh et hanirdaf," that God will seek out the underdog. That's really the attitude. And so when you see the world sympathizing with underdogs, even when they shouldn't, it's a natural instinct that is built into the human condition to side with the oppressed, even when the oppressed were the ones who sort of poked the bear and started the whole thing, right? But and so
That's why Toronto was big Leaf fans.
I wasn't
sugar.
I wasn't thinking in those terms, but I guess maybe, All right. So yes, you're right. A borrower should feel that sense of indebtedness, and I guess that's sort of assumed by the Torah, but the Torah is more explicit about the obligations of the lender to the borrower than the borrower to the lender, because it's understood that you have the financial advantage. Don't exploit your advantage. That's really the Torah's sensitivity. Okay? Now, Uvarach HaShulchan Kasav, Vim over lefanav hamalva kilu dano be'eshu v'mayim. The Aruch HaShulchan's language is that if you pass in front of the borrower when you know that he doesn't have the money, it's as if you're judging him through fire and water, meaning it's sort of like you're through fire and water. It's like you're torturing him. The Gemara actually alludes to this, and therefore you have to be careful about it. However, if they normally interact with each other communally, and to the point where the borrower is not embarrassed to be in the same room with the guy, so then you don't have to worry about it. So then he writes, He says, what happens if the borrower is gainfully employed, but he doesn't have the ability to pay back the whole amount? Nira b'chiyai gavna, she'ein isra lomer loloi v'she'yitain chelak mizeh lechasot achov, v'yifros lo et achov b'tashlumim me'hamaskoret she'mekabel. There's nothing wrong with telling him you'll pay in installments, and we'll take a percentage of your wages every week or every month until the loan is paid off. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. Just because the guy can't come up with the full amount doesn't mean that you can't obligate him and tell him, we'll garnish your wages until you can come up with the full amount. Now, Va'od nira, and furthermore, it seems, she'im yitva et halova beveistin, af shiodea she'em, bless you, afal shiodea she'en lo mimalu shalem. He says, let's say a person takes a guy to Basin, sends him a summons to Basin when you know that he doesn't have the ability to repay the loan. Behagia zman ha'halva uBasin ubeis hadin yechayevo l'shalem ein kan iser shel lo siya lo kenosha. Then when the time of then there's no violation of do not be an oppressor. Meaning, if a guy simply doesn't pay back the loan, and I want to make sure that he knows that he has a halachic obligation to pay back, there's nothing wrong with asking Beis Din to send him a summons. The Shema Dafka ala Malva yesh isur levakesh et chovo, because the Torah only prohibits the Malva from oppressing him, but the Beis Din, the court, is allowed to place that pressure upon him. But he says Vitzarachi, and he says that I'm not convinced. I just want to. There was a case that I'm reminded of when we're talking about this that happened not too long ago. A family from outside that lives outside of our immediate Bayit community contacted me in a panic, saying that we're about to be evicted from our home, and the home is owned by Mr. So-and-so, who is a member of your shul, and we'd like to ask you to speak to him, because how can a frum person allow a family to be out on the street? Okay, so I immediately sensed that there was something fishy. And listening, this is the woman who called me. She said, my husband has a gambling problem, and that's how we lost our house. And so we rented this house, but now we can't pay, and we're going to be out on the street. How can a frum person allow us to be out on the street? And I said, so why are you contacting me? She said, well, this person is a member of your shul. You're his Rav. You should speak to him and tell him. So I had the briefest of conversations with the fellow, who happens to be the landlord. I don't know if he's the full owner, but he's the one who started legal proceedings. He said that they've got the marshal, is it the marshal? The sheriff, the sheriff's office involved, and they're about to be evicted. So, you have to sort of think to yourself, okay, how long has this process been going on? Why am I being brought in at the last minute when they're about to be evicted? Like, what are all of the things that led up?
To get to the point of the sheriff's office.
Yeah,
Is probably between 8 months to a year.
Yeah.
Because you can't, because I went through this with the tenants. You have to take them to court, they don't pay, anytime they're not paying anything.
yeah,
Nothing, no utilities, it takes a year.
right, right.
The law's in the favor of the renter.
Right. So, you have to also remember, based on that, I surmised that maybe there's more to this that I'm not seeing. It's like, oh, help me, I'm about to be out on the street. Well, what happened 8 months ago when the guy told you if you can't pay, you have to find another place? Like, it's not his responsibility to address the husband's gambling problem.
So what happened?
I spoke to the person and I said, I'm assuming that there's more to the story than meets the eye. And he said, yes, it goes back to last February, and I said, okay, I don't need to know anymore. And I basically told the woman, I said, I'm very sympathetic to what you're going through, but you have to understand that this has been a protracted process. He's tried many, many efforts to get you out or to pay the rent, and you haven't. You can't come and play the violin. I didn't say it that way, but and play the violin at the week, the 2 or 3 days before you're about to be evicted, right? And play the chesed card or the how does a frum Jew do this? So there are people who will exploit the system if you're not careful. Okay, so that's and you feel bad on a human level, like how can we help these people? But then you realize maybe I can't help these people because If the husband has a gambling problem and he's just created hell for everyone that's around him, then what am I supposed to do? I can't, like, it's important to know, like, all of us, especially rabbis in the community, have this innate desire to solve problems and to save people who we feel are in trouble. You want to be what's called the Deus ex machina, the God in the machine, to swoop down and just sort of save the day and make everything right. Make everything right. But you can't always be that. You can't always do that. And you also have to know, like, right, so once you get to a certain age and you've been in the business long enough, you realize when you're being played, right? And so you have to also, so it's important to keep that in mind. And especially when we're talking about financial matters, sort of, I don't know, I didn't follow up. I just basically said, I can't help you. She tried calling a few extra times, but I just never returned the call.
For sure,
it's
it's like you said, it's a lot.
Well, that's it. That's the last straw.
It's the last
Someone will
straw.
break down the door
Yeah.
and we'll pull you up at that point. But it's like I said, it's an 8-month, 10-month process and thousands of dollars.
okay. Next she'ela. Halacha ravachat biyadenu shestam halva l'shloshim yom vein rashai hamal v'latova kodem lachein. So as we said before, a standard loan is 30 days, and therefore a lender does not have a right to demand repayment before that time. Mahadin kishaomer haloi v'shapara kodem shloshim yom ha'im neman. What happens if the malva comes after the 30th day and he says, please pay me the loan? And the borrower says, I paid you already. I paid you after 2 weeks. Is he believed when there are no witnesses to that fact? O Shema Amrinan ein adam pareya toch zmano ve'eno neman lomar shapara. Or do we say that such a person is not believed because we assume that if the loan has not matured, you would not have paid it back prematurely. Now, this goes to the issue that we've learned consistently, that there should always be paper when you're taking out a loan, or witnesses, both for the loan, for the act of borrowing, and for the act of repayment of the loan. Okay? And if you are going to repay a loan, you need to ask the lender to give you back the promissory note so that you can tear it up, or that you can have at least have him write on it, paid in full with his signature. Okay? So there's a reason for that. Let's say they didn't do that. They didn't do the right thing. And now you're at a situation where the guy claims, I paid you already. But he says, I paid you before day 30. So does that indicate that there's some a flaw in his claim or some deficiency in his claim, because presumably you would not have paid prematurely? So the tshuva is hagam shechazak ein adam pareh b'toch zmano. Yes, even though it's true that we assume that a person normally does not repay his debts before the time it's due, mikol makom hainu davka b'kovei hazman. But that's only when it was explicitly set the time for repayment. Only when the guy said, okay, the loan is due in 6 months, and that was explicitly stated. Okay? Avol bistam halva, afal pi shezman shloshim yom, neman halo velomer peraticha b'toch shloshim yom. But when there's no stipulation, and you're relying on the standard loan being 30 days, but it was never stated at the outset that the loan is for 30 days. It was just here's the money, and you'll pay me back, right? So in that kind of loan where it's only the law of 30 days kicks in because nothing was stated, so then a borrower is believed if he says, I paid you back 2 weeks after I borrowed the money. Because yes, it's true, a standard loan is 30 days, but that doesn't go so far as to say that he's never going to pay it back before 30 days comes up.
Then how do you resolve this?
If there's no paper trail, then hamotzi mechavero olav haraya. If you wish to extract money from someone, you have to bring proof. So if the lender has no proof that the guy owes him money, because his counterclaim is, I did borrow money, but I paid you back, you're stuck, you know, unless,
Again,
and that's
some of
why.
this will bring into practice, you know, people not lending, you know.
It may, but at the same time, why didn't you write a promissory note? Why don't you have paper, right? So you can't just go over to someone and say, hey, you owe me money, and then expect the basin to take your side if you have no evidence, right?
We don't, most people don't want to carry debt.
Is it true that most people?
It's true that most people do not want to carry debt, and they want to pay off the loan.
Yeah, there's an assumption that most people would want to
I would assume.
pay off their
people that
debts.
are Pigs, and they'll say.
Well,
Okay,
I think those
And
can
the
take,
table.
it's cheap and take advantage of situations. You know, it depends on what they see as being the right thing for them.
So you can take them to base then, make them swear, like all these, like, I mean, you don't have shooters with
So
the.
next time I'm gonna borrow 20 bucks from them, wash them out.
Sign.
I'll give you a letter this long, you gotta read through all the fine.
A promissory note can be as simple as one sentence, right? You know, as long as we don't get the lawyers involved, right? Shorter the better. Yeah.
Those lawyers, not our lawyers.
Okay. The Ramban disagrees with this psak. However, the majority of the poskim, including the Shulchan Aruch, holds like all of the other opinions. And so he just brings that down in the footnote that there is a bit of a machlokas among the Rishonim. Okay, so we'll hold it here for today, and we'll continue. Have a great day, everybody.